Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is such an exciting evening, but I'm first going to tell you a little bit about USF. I'm told to welcome you first, and then we'll get to the really good stuff. But I do want to tell you, I want to thank you all for coming. This is going to be a very exciting evening, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. But I'm first going to tell you a little bit about our campus, because many of you probably don't know, and every time we get a group together, I mention it. This is, we love our little campus. Our little campus has been wonderful, but the building you are in now is 16 years old. 16 years old. And it's lacking in a lot of things, and it has absolutely no space. We're getting to the point where we're having to double up people in offices, which really doesn't work out very well when you're recruiting first-class faculty and staff and students as well. So we have had on the agenda for some time adding new buildings. The good news is that we are adding 2 new buildings. I mean, this is unheard of, and we are so excited about that. Straight out this window, we're going to be breaking ground next month, literally breaking real ground. We're going to break it figuratively, where in the ceremonial sense, and then we're going to have a real groundbreaking where we are actually going to start plowing up the earth to build a student center and residence hall. So we will now stop being just a commuter campus, but we'll be a residential campus. And that means we can recruit students from all over the state, all over the nation, and all over the world. So we'll have international students as well. And we've had so many students that have stopped by and said, I'd really like to go to school there. Where's the dorm? We say, well, we don't have a dorm, and they move on. So we are now going to be able to house students, and this is going to be so incredibly exciting. And for our students to have an opportunity to have space for their government, space for their activities, and space for community events. This is something, we'll have a huge ballroom. So this is our biggest room here, but the new ballroom is going to be much bigger than this, so we can do a lot more things with our community, which is very exciting. But I should say, but that's not all. Or I guess I'm supposed to say, but wait. And say the next thing. So our first building is actually going to start, and we will be done in the spring, actually the summer of 24. And we'll have summer activities, and then in the fall we will open it up to students. So it will be ready to go in 2024. And then we're going to start what's the new academic building. And this is called the Nursing STEM Building. It really was called, we started planning this at least 3 years ago. We called it ISTIC, the Integrated Science and Technology Complex. And we really meant complex and not just building, because it's more than a building, it's integrated. And it's really integrating all of the sciences together and making a very exciting, dynamic building. Then we said, well, wait a minute. This is a community of the arts. We have tremendous arts in this whole area in Sarasota, Manatee, and arts really need to be blended in with the science so that you have a much different environment than just pure science. And so we changed it from ISTIC to ISTAC, Integrated Science, Arts, and Technology Complex. And then we said, okay, well, that's a nice name, but the legislature called it the Nursing STEM Building. So guess what? We called it the Nursing STEM Building now, because we did get our planning money from the legislature gratefully last year, and then we have additional funding from Vern Buchanan from the federal government to add on to that. So we are at a place where we have hired, we're still working on the contracts, but we have hired a contractor and we've hired an architect. And so that building is going to go on, if you follow the building around, on the other side, right across out there from the student center. That building will take, we could, if we had the money, we could have it ready to go in the fall of 24, but we don't. So our biggest job right now is raising the funds to match what we will undoubtedly be able to acquire from the government, but we have to have our investment to do that. So that's going to be a very exciting building. It is going to be, when I say nursing, we started out saying it's going to be nursing because we will increase the size of our nursing program, which is an accelerated 16-month program for students that already have a bachelor's degree. And so these are BSN students with a second degree. And we've said, nursing is great, but while we're planning, a building that is in health sciences. Let's add a number of other disciplines. So it's really interprofessional and integrated health. And so that is taking place. And just the other night, we started talking and said, you know, there's a wonderful program at the University of Florida, Arts in Medicine. Why isn't it that we blend the arts in as also with healthcare? So we've got a lot of good ideas. They are all going to be worked on, and we're going to get going on that very shortly. So 2 new buildings, very exciting is what's going on at the campus. Now, what's really exciting is what you're here for tonight. And I am going to introduce Sarah, Dr. Sarah Hoff. And I think many of you, where's Dan? There he is. Dan Hoff. Many of you met Dan 2 years ago or 3 years? 2 years ago. Yeah, Dan was our speaker at the 9/11 event. It was wonderful. And we didn't know, or maybe Jay Riley knew, because I have to thank Jay for getting this off the ground for us tonight. Jay manages to do virtually anything that you ask him to do, particularly if it matches what's going on in the community. So Jay, thank you so much for bringing this to us. This is terrific. And Sarah, Dr. Hoff, is the section head of GI radiation oncology at Moffitt. She joined the faculty in 2006, senior member of Moffitt, and of course a faculty member at USF in the Morsani College of Medicine. She's been named in 2009, she was named Physician of the Year at Lee Moffitt Cancer Center and Research Institute. So Sarah, thank you for all that you have done for this evening. And I just have to say, all of you who have received this book, please read it. It is absolutely wonderful. I just got it on Friday and I said to Jay, oh, I'm going to have to read a couple books this week. And I read one of them. I didn't read the other one, Bob, but I did read this one. It is a really wonderful book. And the reason I find it so valuable is it's, as you have said particularly, there's a lot of storytelling, and I'm not going to take your stories away, but the storytelling makes it very real. And I think as you read the stories of the first responders, and particularly of all of the people who have been involved with COVID, you will resonate. You will see different parts of it that you can absolutely relate to. And the thing I liked so much is the resilience aspect of it. The resilience, we always think about resilience in terms of buildings and how is a building resilient in the face of a hurricane. But this is about resilient people and resilience that people have. And I think it's an absolutely wonderful book. It makes you think, and it makes you think about all of the things that you have experienced, and you can relate to it completely. So for us to have, I guess I'm introducing Sarah, who's going to introduce Bob, but I just had to put a plug in. Please read this book. I think you will find it. It's a very easy read. It's a very good read, and you'll start reading it and want to keep going, because the stories that people tell are heartwarming, and I think they're stories that probably we thought we knew something about, but we really didn't until you hear firsthand what people really did go through during COVID. So it's an amazing book. Sarah, thank you so much, and I know you're going to do the introduction, so thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Holbrook, for that wonderful introduction. Before we get started tonight, I would like to say a big thank you to all those who serve. So could we just raise our hands for everyone who served, all the healthcare people we see, other folks in the back. We've got first responders, law enforcement, we've got military, former military tonight. So before we get started, could we just all give a big thanks of applause for those who served? And just to tell you a little bit before we get into tonight's program, Bob has pulled double duty today. I had him at Moffitt in the morning. So we have a lot of folks who serve up at Moffitt, and these are our nurse practitioners and our physician assistants. And so Bob and I led them through an exercise where we did some role plays, and then we got them to think about the conflict and the stress that not only they have every day, but also that they went through with COVID, as Dr. Holbrook had mentioned. So thank you for all those who serve. Second, before we get started, just a thank you to all of our sponsors. Huge thanks to Dr. Holbrook, and as she mentioned, Jay. I had never worked professionally with Jay before, and absolutely amazing, from soup to nuts. We got everything done. And a shout out to Kelly and Danielle for everything. You guys are amazing. And then to our sponsors. We have new folks in Sarasota you may not know, sitting right there. We have Nicole Gallo, raise your hand. Nicole Gallo, Kevin Reeves, and Gina. They represent a company that's new to Sarasota called Rittenhouse. And we're just thrilled that they were able to sponsor the evening this evening. Thank you. And then finally, BMW Sarasota and a gentleman named Victor Young. Victor Young is a Moffitt board member. And when I called Victor and I said, Victor, I said, we really need some help sponsoring this program. He stepped up in a big way. And between he and Rittenhouse, we have books that will be provided to you tonight so that those of you who are here on your way out, please stop. Bob will sign a book. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all of that. So now I'm going to get into Bob, and I'm going to give you a short introduction of Bob, and then we're going to show about a 10-minute video that will tell Bob's story. Now, I first met Bob going back in May of 2019. Kerry Nakamoto, who I don't see in the audience yet, but she's a Sarasotan, she had a TED Talk that she hosted up in New York City. And so I went up to the TED Talk, and I was just amazed by the power of the TED Talk that Bob Delaney gave. And from that experience, interacting with Bob, we've been collaborating ever since. And the first thing you know about Bob, which you'll see in the video, is he's had not one, not two, but actually 3 careers. He's in his 3rd career right now. His first career, as he'll tell you, was a very dramatic career. He was undercover in the New Jersey State Police when he was asked to do an assignment that he thought would be temporary. However, this assignment turned into 3 years. 3 years going undercover with the mafia and to bring down many criminals, which he did. Over 30 criminals, as you'll see, were arrested. So that was career number 1. As he'll tell you, career number 1 left a mark on Bob. And then he segued into career number 2. And as many of you know, probably one of the most famous NBA referees of all time, Mr. Bob Delaney. So many of you have seen him on TV, and that was him on TV. He did that for 25 years. He won the highest award, the Theodore Roosevelt Award, which is the highest award that is delivered by the NCAA. And now that brings me to his 3rd career. Through those 2 careers, Bob now selflessly gives back. He goes all around the world. He goes to Iraq. He goes to Afghanistan. He is asked to speak. Any tragedy, any major tragedy in the country brings Bob there, from the Pulse nightclub in Orlando to Fort Hood to any tragedy that befalls this country. They usually ask Bob to go and talk to the folks who've been affected. So the work that Bob is doing is absolutely tremendous. And that brings us to the present. So Bob has been focused on healthcare. When he saw the COVID pandemic and he saw what that would do to healthcare workers, just like the military, just like law enforcement, just like every other affected group that he had seen, he really wanted to do something about it. And he paired together with his co-author, Mr. Shriver, if you would raise your hand. So Dave Shriver, his co-author. He paired together with his co-author, and Heroes Are Human is their new book, which was just released a few months ago. So it is absolutely an honor and a privilege to introduce Bob Delaney. He's going to come to the stage after we show the short video. So welcome to Sarasota. Whoops, wrong way. Mr. Delaney.
No matter the sport, it's generally understood that the best of referees are never noticed. Although they're essential, they are without a doubt the most anonymous people in our fields of play. Since all the games are about the players, it's safe to assume that fans rarely, if ever, give a second thought to an official's life away from the game. That's just fine by NBA referee Bobby Delaney. In light of what he did before basketball, relative anonymity is a prized commodity. Bernard Goldberg has the kind of profile Tony Soprano could relate to.
At a mere 6 feet tall, Bob Delaney, like most NBA referees, is a Lilliputian in a land of giants.
Now what do you want to do?
I want to do right here.
Giants who sometimes get angry at the Lilliputians.
Don't test me.
Bob, I know
Don't
the rules.
test me. Lottie, I'm going to tell you one more time.
Okay, Bob.
Move
Check the rules.
Thank you.
Check the rules.
I read them a lot more than you do.
The fact is, you might get mad at a guy like Bob Delaney, as Michael Jordan once did, but given what he's been through, the Giants are never going to intimidate him. no matter how big they think they are.
I've told players, don't give me that prison stare. Don't think it's going to intimidate me. I don't know what you think you're doing with the prison stare, but it's not going to work.
So whatever intimidation they may try to throw your way on the basketball court, that's like a layup compared to what you've been through in life before that.
This is like being on vacation compared to what I used to do.
Once upon a time, Bob Delaney led a secret life. What he used to do 25 years ago, long before he became an NBA ref, was run a trucking company in New Jersey. What he used to do was hang out and do business with the mafia. I assume you're dealing with some pretty tough guys.
Tough was always a word that I had a difficult time understanding, because if you have somebody that says to you, let's meet, we'll go to dinner, and you sit in the front seat and I sit in the back seat, and now I put a bullet in your head, that's not a tough guy. That's just somebody with a different morality.
It's not a tough guy, but it's not a guy you want to be sitting in the front seat with.
And it's somebody on the street, the word they use for it is capable. He's a capable guy. Capable guys you got to be aware of.
Capable. Capable of?
Killing you.
Did you know guys like that?
Yes.
Which may sound odd when you consider that Bobby Delaney grew up the son of a captain in the New Jersey State Police. He played basketball in college, but left before graduating to become a state trooper, just like his father. And he was doing well until 2 years into the job, when he mysteriously disappeared.
I had heard that he went to Florida with another one of the troopers, and he got himself involved in a murder in Florida, and he wasn't coming back.
Bob Scott was Delaney's partner on the force.
I just couldn't believe it. He was a good person.
Bobby Delaney had gone over to the dark side, just not in the way his state trooper friends thought. He hadn't killed anybody, but he had in fact hooked up with the mob, but not in the way that you're probably thinking either. Bobby Delaney, the cop who disappeared without a trace, had resurfaced with a brand new name, brand new identity. He was working undercover for the FBI to infiltrate the mafia right here in northern New Jersey. You became another person.
Yes, I did.
Who was that person?
I became Robert Allen Covert.
To make it all seem real, the FBI gave him a new Social Security number, a new driver's license. They even gave him a phony police record, which is like a letter of commendation when you're working with the mob. All under his new phony name, Bobby Covert. Bobby Covert.
Bobby Covert.
Why didn't you just call yourself Bobby Undercover while you're at it? Covert.
I know.
You're telling me an undercover cop gives himself the name Covert?
I didn't give myself the name. When we were starting up this undercover operation, we wanted to find somebody with the same first name, the same ethnic-sounding last name, as well as age grouping. So Robert Allen Covert was someone that we found that was dead at birth.
Until he came back to life as Bobby Covert, working on an operation called Project Alpha. With the help of an ex-mob guy turned FBI informant, Delaney started a trucking company, Alamo Transportation, in this building in Jersey City. This literally was the scene of the crime.
Yes, this was our base of operations.
Using hidden cameras installed throughout the building, Delaney compiled evidence of how the mob corrupted legitimate businesses.
Our trucks are making 3 runs to everybody else's run down in the port of Newark because we're kicking back money.
So the mafia is getting a piece of the action.
They're getting a percentage of it. The line is always, you know, nobody's going to bother you. You're with us. You're under our flag. Nobody's going to bother you. And nobody's going to bother you but us.
They get you labor peace. They get you some work. They hijack your trucks every now and then for 25%. And you're recording all the stuff that's going on here?
Right. Well,
besides the hidden cameras, Delaney also wore a wire and taped his phone conversations. In the beginning, he was sure no one was buying his act.
You have this feeling that everybody knows what you're doing, and you think you have cop written on your forehead.
Can I assume you were afraid?
Oh, yes. Yeah, tremendous levels of fear. I was very good at repressing normal reactions to fear. But as I would leave there and drive down the road about 5 miles, I'd have to pull over and throw my guts up. I would have to find the first gas station so I could run in because I had diarrhea. That's what was going on inside me.
They think you're a cop, they might give you a break, but the first thing they're thinking is that you're an informant, a snitch, a rat, stool pigeon, and they're going to kill you.
You're pretty sure about that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know.
Joe Pistone, a former FBI agent, ought to know. He spent 6 years in the 1970s infiltrating the mafia. And in 1997, Hollywood made a movie about his life. Joe Pistone is the real Donnie Brasco, who actually crossed paths with Bobby Covert never suspecting that he was also working undercover.
There's not much room for negotiations, you know. There's no second takes. You make the first take count, otherwise you're history.
Despite the fact that he was working with people who had no qualms about making their enemies history, Bobby Delaney was slowly coming under the grip of an undercover cop's occupational hazard.
You got to be friends with these guys.
Yes.
And friends means what? You go to dinner with them?
Go to dinner, play softball with them.
You meet their families?
Meet their families, meet their kids. I would imagine it's going to be hard for you to understand. It's going to be hard for people in the audience to understand, but they're just regular guys. Some of them are fun-loving, nice people that have really nice hearts.
In other words, Bobby Delaney started believing that the good fellows whose houses he went to, whose families he got close to, really were good fellas.
My morality changed as far as what a bad person was on the street versus when I was a uniform cop. I said to my sergeant one day, Jack, this guy's not a bad guy. All he does is stolen loads. My mindset was, well, at least if they weren't breaking legs and putting bullets in people's heads, that's the bad guys. The other guys are just making a living.
What does that tell you?
It tells you that the street changes you, you don't change the street, and you start to become part of that world.
You're going deeper and deeper, and you're becoming the character you're playing.
No, it's not a character, that's me. Bobby Covert is who I am.
Sensing that after 2.5 years undercover, Delaney was sliding too far, the state police pulled the plug on Project Alpha. And on September 28, 1977, 30 mobsters were arrested. Delaney was there, along with members of the FBI and state police. But unlike his fellow troopers, Delaney was in street clothes.
And one guy says to me, Bobby, what'd they pinch you for? And before I could answer, Barry says to him, he didn't pinch him, he's with us. He's a trooper. And the look that he gave me was a look that wasn't anger. It was disappointment. It was, Bobby, you're my friend, how could you do this to me? I could probably tell you what everybody had on their feet the rest of the day because I couldn't pick my head up. It felt terrible.
Those feelings of guilt ate at Delaney because he knew that eventually he would have to testify against his friends. Joe Pistone, who had just completed his own undercover tour, took Delaney aside and gave him some advice straight from The Godfather.
I told him, you know, Bobby, you got to remember, this is strictly business. It's not personal. There's nothing personal involved in this. You are doing your job, nothing more, nothing less.
As a result of Delaney's testimony, almost all of the 30 wise guys arrested that day were convicted on a variety of racketeering charges. And to add insult to injury...
When it came to trials, I would get up to testify, and the prosecutor would ask me the name that you used undercover would be, and I'd say Bobby Covert. And everybody in the courtroom would start laughing, and the defendants usually didn't. They'd be looking around wondering why everybody was laughing.
The Mafia guys didn't get the joke?
They didn't get the word covert.
Bobby Delaney spent 10 more years as a state trooper, and during that time began refereeing high school basketball games, just as he had before he went undercover. And that, as things turned out, was the beginning of a whole new life.
I was starting to see another side of life that's the good side of life. And you're seeing families go to a ball game. You're seeing the competition of kids.
It sounds like when you made the transition from all that you went through to basketball, it sounds like therapy.
Basketball gave me a peace, and it reaffirmed to me all the things that are good in our society, because I was dealing with all that's bad.
Delaney quickly moved from doing high school games to the CBA, and finally in 1987 to the NBA, where his notoriety preceded him.
As Shaq is walking out to go to the jump ball, he turns around and comes walking over to me, and he said, I want you to get me a job as an FBI agent. And I said, you'd be excellent on surveillance, so I'll be sure to make that call. Now, would you mind going and doing the jump ball so we can get this game going?
Bobby Delaney is 51 now, light years from his old secret life, dealing with guys who would just as soon kill you as look at you.
Is that totally a part of the past, or did that experience change you in some way that exists even today?
Oh, I definitely think it changed me. I definitely think it took a part of my personality and chipped it away for a bit. But I often told people, it reminds you of the mascots. The NBA arenas, they put on that costume, they run around, you know, they get to do whatever they want. You can't do that if there was no costume. Well, my costume was, I was Bobby Covert. So I got to do things that I would never be able to do in life. Very kind, very kind. And as I look out, I know that for the first time in your lives, you've ever applauded for an NBA referee. It's very kind of you.
So what we're going to do, everyone, is we're going to talk a little bit, and then at 5:30, we're going to do Q&A. And then following Q&A, we're going to do a book summary. So I'm going to dive right in, which Bob knows I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, the picture on the wall, your experience undercover, can you walk the audience through what was your process by which someone told you, as you point out in the book, hey, maybe you have a problem after all you've been through? Walk us through what that felt like and how that came about.
So we take it to the end of it, right? So you learned about what the undercover story was, but take it to the last day. And for those of you who participated in anything like this, you muster up like 3 o'clock in the morning. And for us, it was at the West Orange Armory in West Orange, New Jersey. It was uniformed troopers, state police detective, FBI agent, making up a team. 4 go out and start hitting houses. And they start bringing in the defendants. And as they bring them in, I'm with Sergeant Lardier. And you heard part of it up there, but I want to explain it a little bit further. And I had nothing on me. When you work deep cover, you have nothing on you that says you're in law enforcement. And they hadn't given anything back to me yet. And so I'm at the command post, standing next to Sergeant Lardier, and he's in plain clothes, but he's got a state police ID on the side of his jacket. And at one point, as they start bringing the defendants in, he says, you want to go downstairs and see what's going on? Going on means fingerprinting, pictures, shooting them off into rooms and see who's going to be the next informant. I said yes when I meant no, because now they're going to really know who I am. And when I got down there, the military bearing from the State Police Academy came in. I put myself at parade rest. I got my arms behind my back, shoulders back, head up. I'm going to look him right in the eye. And I'm standing next to Sergeant Lardier, and a guy by the name of Ronnie Sardella was being fingerprinted. And for lack of a better term, Ronnie was a friend. We stole tractor trailers together. We did gun deals together. We did dope deals together. And I knew his wife, knew his kids, been to his house many times. And he looked over at me as the trooper was putting the cuffs back on him, and he said, Bobby, what'd they pinch you for? And before I could answer, Sergeant Lardier said, he's not pinched, he's with us, he's a trooper. And the look that went between us was not one of anger, it was one of hurt and disappointment. He looked at me and said, Bobby, how can you do this to me? How can you do it to us? We're friends. Freeze frame, go back to St. Mary's Grammar School, Patterson, New Jersey. I was taught by the Good Sisters of St. Dominic. But I got caught in 4th grade doing something wrong. And Sister Joseph Rozier told me I was going to be punished. And before she told me what the punishment was, I said, Sister, Jimmy DeLello's doing it too. I gave up my best friend in a heartbeat. But you know the ring that the good sisters wear that say they're married to God? It's also there to put welts on your head. Bang. She gave me a crack in the head, and she said, Delaney, you don't tell on your friends. And it's an unwritten rule in a schoolyard that you don't tell on your friends. I told on my friends. And I didn't know how to deal with the feelings that I had. There were some that I didn't care about. There were some that I knew their families and knew their kids. And it was this emotional violence inside of me. I didn't know how to get it out. And so, I couldn't go to an FBI agent or a state trooper and talk to them about it. I mean, they would think I went to the other side. And of course, the wise guys didn't want to hear anything about it. And then it compounded for me about 6 days later. I got called to Division Headquarters, Criminal Investigation Section, where Major Bill Baum sat with me. And as I got into his room, he played a recording from a wiretap at a Genovese Hangout social club in Hoboken, New Jersey, where there was innuendo talk of whacking me. And they were starting to get intelligence information of retribution that may take place. And I tried to act cool and say, it doesn't make for a good day, boss. And he was an empathetic leader. And he said that I would have a security team, and I had troopers around me at all times. And I would have to go out and testify in grand juries, and I would have to go out on surveillances, because while 30 were arrested at the beginning of this, there were over 100 arrested. And one of the troopers that was part of the detail was John Schroth. He was a detective. And John had a background in psychology from Rutgers University. And what he saw in me taking place, because for somebody to want to get away from all this, I got the leather jacket on, 3 weeks leather, and I got the chains around my neck, and I got the pinky ring. I'm back to being Bobby Cover. And we would stop off after a surveillance, and after we got to know each other, we'd get in a bar. I'd start buying everybody drinks. And he said to me, what are you doing, pal? That's not Fed money anymore. That's mortgage money. What are you doing? And so I did the moonwalk from him. He doesn't understand me. And then I was getting paraded around. I testified before the United States Senate. I gave a briefing to Congress. Everybody wanted to hear this story. And I was speaking at Jersey City Police Academy, and in the audience was Dr. Henry Campbell. And Hank was my college psychology professor at New Jersey City University. And after informal therapy, he said, Bobby, what you're going through is post-traumatic stress. I said, get out of here, Hank. I'm a trooper. I'm hearing about these troops coming home from Vietnam. It's not about me. I pushed him away. And then I got lucky for the last time. And a guy by the name of Louis Free, the name may resonate in the room. He was a street agent. He was an FBI agent. He became the 15th director of the FBI. Louis knew I was going through tough times, and he introduced me to Joe Pistone that you saw up on the screen down in Nebraska. And the first time I spoke with Joe, and I looked in his eyes, and I read his body language, and I heard his words, I knew he got what I was going through. It was my first introduction to peer-to-peer conversation. I used to call it peer-to-peer therapy, but I take away every medical-sounding term about post-traumatic stress that I can. Because, folks, from my view, we have over-medicalized this conversation, and we are scaring people away from having it. This is a human condition. It's not a mental illness. And please don't interpret that I'm saying we don't need the medical side of the house. We do. We have tremendous resources. We just have to continually figure out how do we build a better bridge from both sides so that both sides are learning as much. And Joe and I are good friends to this day. And I told Joe the other day, you know, we're all two old dudes. The only place we can go undercover is the senior citizen home and figure out who's stealing the yogurt. I mean, there's nothing else we can do.
Thank you, Bob. And so walk us through the transition to basketball and how basketball was therapeutic for you. What did basketball give you at that point in your life?
I played ball at the high school and college level. And so basketball was always a big part of my life. And you can only play that game for so long, right? And then the body doesn't allow you to jump or move around. And so one thing I knew when I came out from that undercover job is that I wanted to get back to a basketball court for some reason. That gave me an inner peace. And I say to folks today, when you're going through difficult times, find what gives you your inner peace. Your inner peace may be quilting. It may be bicycle riding. Whatever it is for you, find it. For me, it was the game of basketball. I had no intention of becoming an NBA referee. I started refereeing kids' games, and then I moved up to summer pro leagues, and I was working in the Rucker over in New York and City College, and then I was working the Jersey Shore Summer Pro League, and a guy came out of the stands by the name of Darryl Garrettson. He was the director of officials for the NBA at the time and asked if I was interested. And I went into the CBA and Continental Basketball Association. How I found out about Sarasota, because I used to referee in the Robarts Arena, and I refereed at the Manatee Civic Center, and at the Tampa Bay Thrillers, Bill Musselman was coaching up in Tampa. So that's how I also learned about here. So it not only gave me an opportunity to have an inner peace, it gave me a nice place to live for a period of time in my life.
And then the final question, how did you transition to helping others? And you'll see there Bob's book. But I've read all of his books. Surviving the Shadows in particular is wonderful. His new book, as Dr. Holbrook mentioned, is wonderful. But give the audience a sense, where did that sense of I need to pay it forward, I need to help others, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think it comes from how I grew up. I was very fortunate to have the first leaders in my life sit across the dining room table, and my mom and dad. But I was truly raised by a village with my grandparents and aunts and uncles. My grandfather always had this thing, like he would sit at dinner with the newspaper and look through the obituaries. And I remember being there, and he would look to see of people he knew or kind of knew. And he'd always say to me, you got to go there when people are going through tough times. You got to be there. It's easy to be at the parties. You got to go. And so he would every night, maybe not every night, but 4 or 5 times, he would go out and spend an hour. But, you know, it was a different, we're in the city of Patterson. He could walk from his house down to Minchin's funeral home, pay his respects, say hello to the families. And so you came to understand about giving. My father was at 16 and a half when it talked his parents into allowing him to go and serve in World War II. So I came from a family that were givers. And I think that kind of like led me there. And then wanting to be in the state police and seeing what took place there. But also when I started sharing my story about what I was feeling emotionally, every time I spoke, troopers would come up to me and say I was feeling the same thing. And it underlined to me that what is personal is universal. What you're feeling, someone else is feeling. So the more that we speak about it and we have permission to have that conversation, if I speak with you and tell you my story and you tell me your story, We just gave permission to each other, and we validated each other's feelings. And that allows for what I refer to getting the air out of the balloon. Imagine I've got a big balloon I'm holding over my head, full of air. How do I get the air out? Take a pin and pop it, but I don't have a balloon anymore. I can let it go. It flies all over the room. It goes out the back door. We don't know what happened to the balloon. But if we're patient and willing to listen to sounds we do not want to hear, and the sounds may hurt our ears, as we turn it upside down, little air makes that screeching noise. But eventually, we're going to get all the air out of the balloon. We're going to have a full balloon we can use again one day. That's us with trauma. But what do we do more often than not? We push it down one on top of another, on top of another. And if you take that analogy to its fruition, at some point it's going to burst. So I'm not trying to help eliminate post-traumatic stress. My hope is to reduce or find ways to have roadblocks that we can interact with it. If we have education and awareness, we become more knowledgeable. You all remember the Andy Griffin Show? Yeah, some of you saw it live with me. Others of you saw it Nickelodeon. But remember Otis the drunk? Funny dude, right? Otis get himself drunked up on a Friday night, let himself into the cell, wake up Saturday, sleep it off, let himself out of the cell, and go over and have breakfast with Andy and Barney. And we laughed at that until the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers helped us understand that's not behavior to laugh at, that we move the bar in our country. The same thing can be done here. We've done it with HIV/AIDS. We've done it with alcohol, drugs, tobacco. My belief is we need an education program about trauma and about how we interact with it. And changing words matter. When I speak to military troops, we were doing post-traumatic stress education and awareness. I went back to the Pentagon and said, boss, we got to change this. Something's going on, because every time they're looking for ways to get out of it, and they're sitting there with their arms folded and they're leaning back. We change it to operational stress. Yes, sir, I got operational stress because I'm operational. And so the words matter. I don't refer to mental health, I call it mind health. Mental health to me conjures up mental illness. And so the more that we're cognizant of how we speak about this and normalize this conversation, and Dr., hearing about this nursing program here, of implementing programs like this at nursing schools and pre-med, not speaking about later, because Surviving the Shadow is a journey of hope into post-traumatic stress. As was introduced, Dave and I co-author, and the easiest way to describe how we work, we come up with a plan and we have it. Then I go gather the wood, he builds the house, and then we sit down and decorate it together for about 6 takes every time. We got to go through it over and over. And you know, he's American University trained, and he's got all, and I had to teach him how to talk like a Jersey guy, because it's got to be in my voice. And so we had to cut words, and it was a whole new learning experience. But the work that we do, when we went after Surviving the Shadows, the reason we call it Surviving the Shadows is that I believe everybody has shadows in their lives. Dr. Richard Malika is the director of the Harvard Global Mental Health Trauma Program. I was a student under him, and now I present at that program. And he has a very simple statement. He says, trauma is inescapable in life. What a true statement. We go around the room, every one of us has experienced trauma in our lives. And so surviving the shadows, never be afraid of a shadow. Because in order for a shadow to exist, there has to be light nearby. It is our responsibility to ourselves and to each other to get to that light. And then Heroes Are Human came as a result of when COVID took place. I'm driving by hospitals and I'm seeing heroes work here. And I know anyone that's been given that title of hero doesn't like it. These are ordinary folks doing extraordinary things. I was told I was heroic. I was a brave guy. But people didn't see me at 2 o'clock in the morning walking around my house pushing shower curtains back with my gun out because I was paranoid they were coming to get me. And so all of these feelings that were putting people on pedestals, I knew they weren't feeling that way, and I wanted to understand more. So Dave and I started delving into it and interviewing folks. And one of the things that we made a conscious effort of, we wanted their voices to be heard, not what we interpreted. That was the reason. Dave wrote an article about me when he was working at Tampa Bay Times, or St. Pete Times, and it got all kinds of recognition. And one of the things my wife Billy said is, that's the best article that's ever been written about you, because he tells your story, not his version of it. And that was the difference. And then I said, I had different people that were coming to me about wanting to write books, and that's when Dave and I got together. But this book, one of the things that we wanted to do, tell their stories and allow them to speak it, but then have a reflection direction at the end of it where people could take and try and learn from what they experienced. And that's part of the experiential learning. But also, if you notice, this is a conscious effort that this is the same color of scrubs that are worn by those who serve us. And also, this book is a little bit smaller. And the whole idea, and this was our agent came up with this is a book that you want to cradle and embrace when you speak, when you're reading it. So there's a lot of nuances to it. And the stories of heroes are human. Heroic things are done. Courage, this took me a long time to understand. Courage is not absent of fear. Courage takes place despite the fear that you experience. So we get this image of what courage is, but it's not only the courage of running up a hill with bullets coming, it's the courage, the moral courage of making decisions that are right and all those kinds of things. And in the healthcare community, what I came to find, the parallels to what our military goes through are very, very strong because they have been at war with an invisible enemy. And so those kinds of experiences I wanted to bring out. Not all wounds bleed, folks. Invisible wounds cut as deep as the wounds we do not see. And at times, invisible wounds can get a scab over it just like the wounds we do see. And then a trigger, a date comes up on the calendar, a smell, a kind of a feeling, and all of a sudden that gets hit off. And now a new trauma is compounding with an old trauma.
Wonderful, which leads us to resiliency. And so hearing that, Bob, what lessons can you share with the audience from your work in this field about how we can all become more resilient? You mentioned peer-to-peer conversations. There's other things that you go into in the book. You mentioned reflection, which he has at the end of each chapter. Give the audience a sense of what they can walk away with to build their own resilience.
Your resiliency, I think many times it's thought of as an individual thing when there's a collective resiliency, right? There's a collective resiliency on this campus. There's a collective resiliency in the churches that you attend. There's a collective resiliency in your families, at your workplaces. Embracing that and understanding that is important. But I break down resiliency into 3 segments. There has to be a confrontation to the reality. We have to identify what we're confronting. But I changed the word because confrontation comes across in a negative way, right? I mean, it kind of sounds like a rough word. So I like the word carefrontation. We confront because we care. So you add a little bit when carefrontation takes place. And then the second part, there has to be a search for meaning. You have to understand what's taking place. And I would offer that while we all have different religious beliefs, that there is a spirituality that is part of resiliency. And then the third part is FIA, flexible, innovative, and adaptive. We have to be flexible, innovative, and adaptive in understanding resiliency. This photograph that you see is in Iraq. It was in Baghdad. And one of the things that the generals wanted me to understand is what happens to one of our troops when they get hit in the battlefield. And they're taken to a field hospital, then to Baghdad when it was in Iraq, and then over to Landstuhl, Germany, which is our largest medical facility. And then they would come home to BAMC or one of the veterans hospitals. And when I went to the first hospital, we were in Mosul, and I went into a field hospital, and the doctor's giving me a tour, and halfway through, I said, "It's all good, Doc, but who's taking care of you?" And he smiled, and he walked outside, and out behind the field hospital, a small patch of grass in the desert was being cared for, and you could tell it was being clipped like with the scissors. It was just a little piece. It was a stick with rocks attached to it, and there was a pitcher of water, and you could pour it over the top, and it would sound like a babbling brook. And he said, when things get too tough, my staff and I come out here to reset. We use nature to be able to help us calm and get back to where we need to be. I go to Afghanistan, and I'm over in Bagram, and they're getting a tour, and the doctor is halfway through, and I said, "Doc, who's taking care of you?" And she said, "Take a walk." And we went up, and if you go to the next slide,
This one.
There you go. And that's up in Afghanistan. And she said, when things get too tough, we come up here, up to the rooftop, and look out at snow-capped mountains in Afghanistan. And for us, we're in Colorado, or we're in Utah. And it's the nature that allows us to calm and get back to doing what we're doing. And so this is the kind of way that I really believe. I have a 21-minute video that we use at Harvard
You notice I say that a lot, right? I mean, I say Harvard a lot. My fifth grade teacher never had my name in Harvard on her lips. And so, and that 21-minute video speaks about how nature is so helpful to us, right? Even like I'm one of these guys now, right? The kids are out of the house. Billy and I, we got a cat, and Ruby is like become the family member. I mean, I'm the guy that I never thought I'd become with this cat. I love the cat, but she teaches me a lot because she gets startled, and then she goes right back to her business, right? She gets startled, and it's like, then she calms down, and then she goes about her business. What happens when we get startled? We obsess, and we start going down a path, and we start making it work. I mean, simple email can come in, and if you misinterpret it, you're in a mock battle ready to pound it out, right? You're getting all emotional. We allow ourselves to get caught up in emotion, and emotions are meant to be felt, and how we interact with those emotions are important. Those who serve, whether it be the military uniform, law enforcement uniform, firefighters uniform that I see, at times we think those uniforms allow us to leap tall buildings in a single bound, that we can handle anything. And while heroic things are done on a daily basis by those who wear uniforms, we can never lose sight of the fact that there's a human being inside of that uniform. No different than the scrubs that Doc is wearing. The scrubs and the lab coats do the same thing for our healthcare community. We have to be there to thank, honor, and support them. They have been at war with an invisible enemy. We have to thank, honor, and support them because, folks, we are losing people from the healthcare community. They are burnt out. They are going into other aspects or other professions. That impacts every one of us because that expertise is being lost. They have to be cared for and also honored. It is amazing to me when we gift these books and these programs that we're going around. We've done it at other hospitals. You get tears in eyes of doctors and nurses because someone is acknowledging them and saying, we understand what you're going through. That's an important part of what this is as well.
And we're going to get to your questions shortly. I'm just going to ask Bob to wind down with some very important slides. So Bob, if you would,
this is my new favorite thing. This is, anybody know kintsugi? Kintsugi? Yeah. When I first learned about it, I called it kintsugi because I'm from New Jersey and we do long A's, we long G's, we do long everything, right? Kintsugi. And somebody came up and said, it's a Japanese art form, I know, but it's called kintsugi. And kintsugi is really interesting because what do we do in our society when something breaks? When something breaks, we throw it out. Broken is no good to us. And yet in the Japanese culture, this art form is important because when something breaks, they use gold and silver glues to put it back together. And it's still usable. It's beautiful. It can be shown again. It's probably stronger because it's been reinforced. I would offer to you that's our humanity. We're going to get broken at times, but it doesn't mean that we get thrown out or that we're broken and not able to move forward. This is about figuring out how we can take what we go through and learn from it so that we can make the world a better place.
And then your last slide.
Yeah, the last one is, I'll close with this. For those of you that are NBA fans, you know the tall gentleman is David Robinson. David and I are NBA Cares Ambassador, and in 2013, on the eve of Veterans Day, we were asked to meet with a Navy SEAL team that had just come home from deployment, and we met with them and their families in Williamsburg, Virginia. And the next morning, we were the guests of General Jeff Buchanan at the wreath laying at the Tomb of the Unknowns. And when President Obama laid that wreath, we were front and center, and then we were invited to his words in the amphitheater behind at Arlington Cemetery. And during that, if you remember, President spoke about Mr. Richard Overton. And Mr. Richard Overton at the time was one of the oldest living World War II veterans at 106 years of age. And David and I got eye contact, and without saying a word to each other, we read each other's mind. We wanted to meet this great American. And as soon as the president's words were completed, we ran as fast as we had since we came off the NBA floors and cut across, and we got there first. And David shook hands and spent time. And as I took photographs, it struck me. This man served at Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. And had I lived during the time he served, he and I would have drank from different water fountains. He and I would have used different restrooms. Yet he fought for me. He fought for me and my family. He fought for you and your family. And when it was my turn to spend time with Mr. Overton, I expressed that gratitude a lot. And I guess I think I went too far, because at one point he grabbed my hand a little tighter. He pulled me closer. And with a wink of his eye, he said, "You know, I can still do more." He died at 112 years, 230 days of life. That photo is in my office. It's a reminder every day that I can do more. I can do more to be a better person. I can do more to be a better father, husband, grandfather, all of those things. But I also can do more to take care of me. Because taking care of me is going to allow me to be a better person to serve this world. And folks, I would underline that self-care does not mean selfish. And unfortunately, at times we think that way. And we are judgmental about what takes place to us. We minimize what takes place to us and say, somebody else is going through something worse. I don't feel like I should even talk about what I'm experiencing. I'm going to close with this analogy. How much does this weigh? Not heavy, 8, 9 ounces. I can carry this pretty easy, right? Your stuff is your stuff. Just imagine this is your stuff. It's not much, right? But imagine carrying it every day. What if I stood here for the next 60 days, holding this like this, and you come back? I'm going to be a pain in the neck to be around. This is going to pull on my shoulder. It's going to feel heavy. It's going to gain a kind of weight to me. It's not until I learn how to put it down and walk away from it, or ask someone else to help me carry it, that I will interact with it better. That's us with our stuff. Your stuff is your stuff. Take care of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Delaney.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the floor is now open for questions. So if anyone has a question, Jay, do we have a handheld? Okay.
We do, and just raise your hand because Charles needs it for the video.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to get on TV.
Oh, my watch. Yes. Does anyone have a question? Okay.
So thank you for your eloquent and enlightened conversation. I do have an analogy and a question, and I'm talking about educators in the world today. When you speak of resilience and mind health, I think that in service industries like educators who are mistreated, who are misunderstood, and especially now with the cultural wars with African Americans, and looking at news and reading news and listening to legislation that is impacting across race, across difference, across gender, how would you speak to someone who is trying to go through these issues with PTSD because of history, because of being marginalized, because of being a part of a historical structure that is misunderstanding of individuality, of humanity in these times? And trying to, and I guess I'm talking about myself too, because I do feel like I'm going through a stage of PTSD, because I've gone through the civil rights movement, and I've walked side by side with my black sister and black brother, my white brother and white sister, or my Jewish brother and my Jewish sister, and we're all speaking of the same thing that you're talking about today: humanity, resilience, mind health. And somehow it doesn't seem to stick. So my question to you is, as you look at the 112-year-old man, or the 67, almost 68-year woman, and say, how do we take these spaces of humanity and find that glue on that pot to find the silver lining, to find the gold, and to say, yes, we're all in this together, despite what we see, Despite what we hear, we do have resilience, and it can stick because we all have stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I could say it any better than you. I'm coming and getting a hug. I'm telling you, you said it better than I could say it. You said it beautifully. You said it. You said it way better than I could ever do. It's true. You know, we're seeing things on TV, right? I speak at law enforcement leadership seminar. One of the things that I asked at one recently was I wanted them to imagine that George Floyd's in Minnesota. Just envision this. And I asked them to envision that at one point, one of those other cops pulls that bully with a badge off of George Floyd. We never hear of George Floyd, just another arrest in another town. It doesn't get to what it got to. The question I have is, who gets vilified in that police department? The guy that pulled him off, or the guy that had the knee on the neck? Unfortunately, I think I know the answer. That's where the problem is. We need to change and figure out how are we going to police in ways that are, in behavioral ways that I was taught by my senior man. That guy that you saw up on that screen, Bobby Scott, he drilled into my head. Just because you have a badge and a uniform doesn't mean you get to be disrespectful or demeaning to folks. He said, you will truly know when you're a professional cop when after you give somebody a ticket or you arrest them, they say thank you. They're not thanking you for what you did, they're thanking you for how you did it. When we get to understand and make those kinds of steps, the question that you asked is how? I think we do it in our own little sphere of influence. We have to make the world a better place where we can make it a better place, and then hope that it just gradually and continually moves in a direction. There's evil in this world, and we all know it, but there's a lot more good than there is bad, and we've got to keep fighting for the good. But thank you for your words, and thank you for your question.
We have time for a couple more, Jay?
Yeah, I love the peer-to-peer sort of ability to communicate. A friend of mine who spoke here as well, Garrett Lindgren, was with the FDNY, and he would share basically his vulnerabilities, what he went through. But how do you promote that among soldiers, among police, among fire? Because the more people who could actually be vulnerable and share what they're feeling, it opens up the world for everyone else.
Yeah, we have peer-to-peer. On Thursday night, I'll be with General Brian Fenton. He's the commander of SOCOM now, and we're working on programs exactly that, right? So peer-to-peer, we can help foster that by creating environments for it. Do you all remember a movie called Taking Chance? Taking Chance was a movie where, it was an HBO movie where Kevin Bacon played the lieutenant. They wanted to show what happens and how the reason it's called Taking Chance, it was Chance Phelps was the Marine who was brought home from Iraq. And it was the escort officer. It was the story of the escort officer bringing a body home from one of our military troops. And Chance Phelps' dad is John Phelps. John owns a ranch up in Wyoming. He allows that ranch to be used for military, wounded warriors, veterans, cops, firefighters, to go out on hunting expeditions on his ranch. It's not about the hunting expeditions. It's about 2 or 3 days getting them together and being around that campfire at night. So the peer-to-peer, so you create the environments. We're constantly thinking of ways to create the environments, because while I thought of things as sports, to where we could create this environment where people can, whether it's Vets on Deck, where it's sailing, Ride to Recover, which is bicycle riding, all these kinds of things, I had to move the bar because not everybody's into sports, right? So, we started, for lack of a better term, at one point down at Fort Benning, we had like band camp, because through art and through singing and through music, they were able to. And then I found this guy, Jeff Barillo, and he served in the military. He's a rapper. And he had a rap song called Soldier Hard. I know he goes by the name Soldier Hard. That's his rap name. He has a song called Red Flags. And red flags is about post-traumatic stress and about leading to suicide and things. And so I brought him around, and it was like when he and I showed up, it was like Snoop Dogg and Frank Sinatra showed up. It was like, we look like nothing alike that we should have been hanging together. But it's like whatever environment you have to use to create the environment to allow people to have that, but you have to create it and make them feel comfortable so that they're in a trusting environment.
I think we have time for one more, if anyone has one more, and then we'll take Bob to do the book signing.
Yes, Doc. Dr. Mark Lonsdale, it's because of him that I was able to run up and down the floors of the NBA for so long. He kept my back in great shape and a lot of epidural shots to get through that pain.
I say, first of all, don't believe everything Bob says. But you talk about heroes, and I met you a long time ago, and I immediately thought you were a hero. I couldn't figure, when you're in the state police and they wanted somebody to go undercover, the danger. And I'm sure you've spent a lot of time meeting a lot of other heroes, whether Medal of Honor winners, military people, perhaps this person who recently out in California during this tragedy jumped in and grabbed a gun. From all those people you've met, is there anything that you've come across that causes a person at that spur of a moment to make that decision to put their life in such danger to do something? There's something in their background, their upbringing, there's anything that you've...
Yeah, it's an amazing question. I mean, I've seen it so. Pete Abbott's in a room, and Pete was NYPD during 9/11, and the amount of heroic things that would be termed heroic, but they would never want to be told they were heroic. You know, and you get to spend time with those folks and speak with them. It's a reaction, I think, that comes as a result of caring for another human being, and that is as basic as it gets. It's like fighting for what's right, and as long as we continue to move the bar in that direction, we're going to be a better place. You know, when this comes to this thing of mind health, you have to take little wins. We're never going to go right here, right? We're not going to go from 0 to 100. So you take little wins. So the little win that I saw recently, Simone Biles. Think about, had Simone Biles 2 or 3 Olympics ago said she wasn't going to participate, she would have been vilified as being unpatriotic. And yet we have moved the bar in our country to understand that this is a twisty, and we understood, and the mind health has to be perfect for someone that's 12 to 15 feet in the air, twisting around and then coming down. We're growing. We're getting to understand this better. But I believe that we've got to move in a direction of understanding resiliency and providing training for folks about resiliency. We've gone a little bit sideways where everybody shows up and they get a trophy. We've got to move the bar of understanding you can lose and still be successful. At times, I think we're babying our society when we need to make it a mature society. And when we start doing that as a country, we're going to be a better place. And we're going to go there. We're going to get better. It's just who we are. We're going to fight to get better. And because good people make this place better, and there's a lot more good than there is bad in this country.
That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And guys, before we leave tonight, Bob, I'm going to ask Bob to go out first. So
this is like the Oprah show. Everybody gets a book.
So on your way out, please stop by. Bob is going to sign a book. Again, it's all from our sponsors, Rittenhouse and BMW. So thank you so much for coming.